Cora Finley didn't cry at the funeral. Not because she wasn't broken. She was. William had been her heart, her anchor, her best friend. But tears didn't come easily anymore. They had been wrung out of her long before the casket closed. In long hospital corridors and sleepless nights where beeping machines whispered that death was nearer than hope. Now, as she stood in the cold light of a January morning, with her 4 sons beside her in borrowed suits that didn't quite fit, Cora felt only silence in the pit of her soul. The cemetery was quiet except for the wind tugging at her coat and the soft shifting of shoes on damp earth. No one from her side of the family had come. She didn't expect them to. Not after what she did. 12 years ago, she'd made a choice. She chose love over expectation. William Finley wasn't the man her parents wanted for her. Not polished enough, not wealthy enough, not their kind. He was a mechanic with rough hands, a quick wit, and a kind soul. But he wasn't Robert Whitmore, the rising attorney her father had practically signed a contract for her to marry. Cora had walked away from all of it. The family name, the trust fund, the country club invitations, and never looked back. Or so she told herself. But now, as the last handful of dirt hit the casket, Cora couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake. Not in choosing William, never in that, but in believing love would be enough to shield them from the world's cruelty. She glanced at her sons. Nick, 17, stood rigid, his jaw clenched, refusing to let the tears fall. George, 15, had his hand on Charlie's small shoulder, the 8-year-old burying his face into his brother's side. Paul, 12, stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable, like he'd already locked his feelings away. They looked so much like their father. It both comforted and shattered her. After the service, the crowd of mourners, mostly from the garage where William worked and a few neighbors, offered soft condolences and casseroles. No one knew what to say to a widow with 4 sons and nothing left in the bank. William's illness had been long and brutal, the medical bills mountainous. The health insurance Cora once had through her marketing executive position was long gone. She'd resigned after months of unpaid leave. The company had been sympathetic until they weren't. By the time William passed, the savings were drained. The 401k had been cashed out a year ago. The retirement fund gone. Credit cards maxed. The house, barely hanging on. The furnace had stopped working the week before Christmas. They had all slept in the living room, huddled together under blankets. And now, William was gone, and Cora was standing at the edge of a cliff with no parachute. At home that evening, if their small 2-bedroom rental could still be called that, Cora pulled off her heels and sat down at the dining table, the one piece of furniture that still bore the gloss of better days. The boys were in the living room, quiet. Too quiet for boys that age. She stared at the stack of bills piled by the toaster. A red-stamped envelope from the power company. A final notice from the landlord. An unopened letter from the school district. Probably about lunch fees or missed PTA meetings. Everything felt heavy. Final. Nick appeared in the doorway. "Do we still have leftovers from Mrs. Gray?" Cora looked up. His voice was deeper now, more grown than she was ready for. "Yeah, in the fridge. There's lasagna and cornbread." He nodded but didn't move. "Do you need help with anything?" "No, baby. Go eat." He lingered a second longer before disappearing down the hallway. He was stepping into his father's shoes too soon. She could see the weight of it already settling into his shoulders. That night, after the boys went to bed, Cora stood in the small laundry room, folding the same shirts she'd folded 1,000 times. She held one of William's flannel work shirts to her face and inhaled the fading scent of oil and aftershave. She let herself cry then, silent, gasping sobs into fabric that no longer held warmth. She had no plan, no backup, no miracle waiting around the corner. She thought about calling her parents, just to let them know William had died. Maybe they'd understand now. Maybe the pain of losing someone would soften them. But she could already hear her mother's voice in her head. "We warned you. You chose that life. You chose him." And they had warned her. The night she packed her suitcase and left home, her father told her she'd be dead to them. And he'd kept his word. She hadn't heard from them since. William's parents had been no better. They never believed she married him for love. "She's just using you," his mother had said more than once. "When you're broke, she'll leave." But she didn't leave. She stayed. Through the job losses. Through the nights William threw up blood. Through the chemo and the cold sweats and the panic attacks. Through everything. And now she was here. Alone. But not broken. Not yet. The next morning, she was up before the sun. She made toast and scrambled eggs from the last carton. The boys ate quietly, the air between them thick with uncertainty. Cora looked at each of them, Nick, George, Paul, and little Charlie, and felt something stir in her chest. Fear, yes, but also fire. These boys were her reason, her legacy. They were all she had left of William, and they were enough. "Boys," she said, placing her coffee mug down, "I know this is hard. I don't know what comes next yet. But I promise you, we're going to figure it out. We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." Nick looked at her, his eyes steady. "We've got your back, Mom." George nodded. "Whatever we need to do, we'll do it." Paul didn't say anything, but he reached over and squeezed her hand. And Charlie, sweet, quiet Charlie, slid off his chair and hugged her waist. In that moment, in a broken-down kitchen with cracked tiles and no savings, Cora Finley realized something powerful. They might have lost everything, but they still had each other. And sometimes, that's where empires begin. Let us know where you're watching us from. And if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. You have nothing to lose, and it will mean the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. There was no time to mourn in poverty. The Monday after William's funeral, Cora Finley pulled her hair into a bun, dug out a faded pair of black pants, and walked into the first diner she passed with a "now hiring" sign taped to the window. She didn't wait for a formal application. She asked for the manager, looked him in the eye, and said, "I need a job. I can start today." By lunch, she was balancing plates of hash browns and bacon on tired arms and offering strained smiles to truckers and nurses on break. The pay was lousy, the tips unpredictable, and the shifts long. But it was a start. From there, her days stretched into a blur of hustling. By morning, she worked tables. By afternoon, she cleaned houses, the kind she used to be invited to for book clubs and bridal showers. By evening, she picked up tutoring jobs, helping neighborhood kids with algebra or SAT prep for $20 a session. Sleep came in short, shallow bursts. Meals were skipped more often than eaten. Her back ached. Her hands cracked from bleach and dish soap. But she kept going, because she had to. Nick, her oldest, didn't wait for permission. 2 weeks after the funeral, he picked up shifts at a car wash, then landed a weekend gig bagging groceries. He was 17 and still in school, but he made it work. He'd come home with chapped hands and grease-stained shirts, but he always placed his crumpled bills on the kitchen counter without a word. George, 15, took on a different role. He became the steady voice in the house, the one who helped Charlie with his homework, who checked Paul's science projects, who made sure everyone had their backpacks ready by the door each morning. He made jokes when things were tense. He hugged Cora when she was too tired to stand. He cooked dinner when she didn't come home until after dark. George wasn't just the man of the house, he was the glue. Paul, 12, was quiet but sharp. He started borrowing books from the library on web design and computer programming. He taught himself HTML on a school laptop and spent hours building things no one asked for. One afternoon, Cora came home to find him designing a website for a fictional dog walking service. "It's just practice," he said, shrugging, as if it were nothing. Charlie, just 8, wore it all on his face. He was the most sensitive, the one most aware of the shift in their lives. Loud noises made him flinch. Changes in routine unsettled him. Sometimes, Cora would find him curled up in the laundry room with his blanket, hiding from the world. But when he smiled, really smiled, it felt like the sun breaking through storm clouds. They did what they could. They survived. Barely. There were nights when the pantry was almost empty. Cora learned to stretch a bag of rice and frozen vegetables into a meal. She told the boys it was supper surprise, and they played along. George always said, "This is actually my favorite," even when it was just toast and eggs again. Shoes were passed down until soles split. Winter coats came from donation drives. Paul refused to go to school one day because a kid called his sneakers graveyard kicks. Nick found the boy after school and had a quiet word. The kid never spoke to Paul again. Cora hated using food stamps, hated the way some cashiers looked at her like she was failing at life. But she held her head up. She reminded her boys that needing help wasn't weakness. It was survival. They faced eviction twice in the first year. The first time, she begged the landlord for a few extra weeks. The second time, she stood in court with trembling hands and told the judge she was doing everything she could. They were allowed to stay, barely. A social worker showed up once. A neighbor reported too many children, not enough supervision. Cora had just come home from her third job. She was sweaty and exhausted and furious. "I'm raising 4 boys by myself, lady," she said, her voice shaking. "They're fed. They're clothed. They're loved. That's more than some kids get in perfect houses with perfect lawns." The woman nodded and left. She never came back. Through it all, Cora never let her spirit die. She told her sons they were warriors, that their last name meant something. That struggle wasn't shameful. It was the soil where strength grew. They had no extras, no luxuries. But they had music. George found an old radio in someone's trash and fixed it. At night, they danced in the kitchen to classic rock and Motown. They had laughter. They had stories. They had each other. One night, the power went out. It was late October. The heating bill hadn't been paid. The lights clicked off mid-sentence during George's retelling of a school prank. For a moment, no one moved. Then Paul grabbed a flashlight. George pulled out candles. Charlie fetched blankets. Nick made sandwiches from what was left in the fridge before it all spoiled. They sat on the floor, wrapped in layers, illuminated by soft yellow light. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, it was warm with their closeness. Cora looked around the circle, her heart aching with love and sorrow. "I'm sorry," she said, tears glistening. "I wish I could give you more." Nick leaned forward. "Mom, you gave us everything that matters." George nodded. "We're not hungry. We're not alone. That's more than some people have." Paul looked up from the flickering candle. "One day, we'll give you everything back. You won't have to work 3 jobs. You'll have a house with a garden. And heat." Charlie got on her lap and whispered, "We're going to be rich, Mama. Rich and happy." Cora laughed softly, brushing tears from her cheek. "You don't have to be rich to be happy, baby." "No," Nick said, "but it wouldn't hurt." They all chuckled. And in that fragile, flickering moment, surrounded by darkness and dreams, they made a silent pact. They would rise. For her. For each other. No matter how long it took. Cora Finley used to wonder if the hard years would ever end, or if they would just evolve into something quieter, but equally heavy. She had learned to live with rationed joy and quiet sacrifices. The kind that no one applauded, the kind that chipped away at you slowly. But time was relentless, and her boys, her 4 boys, kept moving forward, refusing to bow under the weight of their circumstances. Nick, now 21, had the same look in his eyes that William once did, clear, steady, always searching for the next move. He enrolled in a business program at the community college, taking early morning classes before heading to work each evening at a shipping warehouse. By night, he'd sit at the kitchen table under the same buzzing light bulb he used to do homework beneath, now poring over spreadsheets and market trends instead of calculus and Shakespeare. "I'm not just going to survive, Mom," he said one evening, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm going to build something. Something big." Cora smiled as she passed him a cup of black coffee. "You always were the builder." George, dependable, loyal George, took a different path. Though he skipped college, he taught himself Photoshop, Illustrator, and every video editing software he could download for free. He built a portfolio from scratch, offering free design services to local musicians and small businesses. He transformed their branding and built websites that didn't just look good, they made money. He worked out of the living room, his laptop balanced on a thrift store desk, headphones always slung around his neck. He was 19 now, and already had a growing reputation online as G. Finley Designs. His work spoke for itself, clean, modern, sharp. George never said much about the past, but Cora saw it in the way he made things beautiful. It was his way of healing. Then there was Paul. Sweet, serious Paul. At 16, he wasn't just good at coding, he was remarkable. He spent hours in his room typing furiously, building apps, breaking them, and starting again. His latest project, a simple tool to help independent sellers track inventory across different platforms, started gaining unexpected traction. 70 downloads this week, he told Cora one afternoon, trying to sound casual. Nothing major, just steady. But Cora saw the way he bit the inside of his cheek to keep from grinning. Charlie, the baby, was growing up fast. At 12, he had the eyes of someone twice his age. He wasn't as technical as Paul, or as visionary as Nick, but he had an uncanny knack for seeing the moving parts of a system and making them better. He organized his brother's schedules, tracked expenses, built spreadsheets, and even negotiated a discount with the internet provider when their bill spiked one month. "Let the others dream," he liked to say, scribbling notes in a battered legal pad. "I'll keep the machine running." It started as a joke one night, an idea tossed around the dinner table as Cora served lentil soup. "What if we started something together?" Nick asked, tearing a roll in half. "Something real. A business." "You already have your hands full," Cora said, raising an eyebrow. "Exactly," George chimed in. "We've already got skills, Mom. Design, code, logistics, business. Why not bring them under one roof?" Paul nodded. "We could build something digital. Scalable. A platform." Charlie leaned forward. "What about helping small businesses find sustainable packaging? Most can't afford the big suppliers." And just like that, the Finley brothers had a mission. They started small. Really small. Nick used his warehouse contacts to find distributors. George built a sleek website that looked far more expensive than it was. Paul handled the back end, coding late into the night. Charlie created systems for tracking inquiries, orders, fulfillment, everything. They called it Green Edge. It was rocky at first. There were bugs, missed deadlines, suppliers that fell through. More than once, Cora found Nick sitting on the porch, head in his hands, questioning if it would ever work. But they pushed through, one rejection at a time. Cora supported them the only way she could, with space, food, and endless encouragement. She kept her job cleaning offices, but on Sundays she made big pots of chili or stew, enough to stretch across the week. Sometimes she listened through the door as the boys pitched to small vendors or argued about UI design and sourcing costs. She never interfered. She just prayed, and kept the fridge stocked with whatever she could afford. Then one morning, everything changed. Nick burst into the kitchen with an unreadable look on his face, somewhere between disbelief and joy. "We got it," he said, holding out his phone. "A major skincare brand just signed. A 6-month contract. Nationwide." George looked up from his laptop, blinking. "Wait, what?" "They love the platform. Said they've been looking for something just like it. We're starting with 5,000 units per month. It's real." Paul jumped up and let out a rare whoop, startling Charlie, who spilled orange juice on the table. Charlie clutched his notebook. "We need to scale. Fast." Cora stared at her sons, her heart full and her hands trembling. "How much is the contract worth?" Nick smiled. "First quarter, about 250,000 in revenue." Silence fell for a beat. Then Charlie whispered, "Mama, we did it." They renamed the company 2 days later. The new name, Finley Brothers, wasn't about ego. It was about legacy. "We wanted to use Dad's last name," George explained to Cora. "It's our way of saying thank you. For what he gave us. For what you gave us." Cora wept when she saw the logo. Just simple black lettering with a green leaf above the I in Finley. Clean. Strong. Hopeful. They went viral after a business blogger posted a short write-up titled, "For Brothers Built a Green Empire Out of a Broken Home." The piece took off overnight. By the end of the week, they had calls from investors, invitations for interviews, and hundreds of new inquiries. Cora stood at the back of the living room the night they filmed their first Zoom segment with a morning show. She didn't say anything, just watched as her boys, now men, sat in front of the camera in collared shirts, smiling nervously as they told their story to America. Nick opened the interview. "We didn't have much growing up, but we had a mother who never let us quit. She taught us resilience. Everything we are started at that kitchen table." That night, after the cameras were off and the boys had scattered to their laptops and notepads again, Cora sat in the quiet kitchen and held her cup of tea. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just smiled. Because the world that once turned away, it was finally turning back. The invitations came quietly at first. An email here, a friend request there. Then came the letters. The phone calls. The "we've been thinking about you" messages that rang so hollow. Cora wondered if the senders even believed their own words. The Finley brothers had made headlines again. A Forbes article called them a model for family-led startups in the sustainability space. Their valuation had crossed the 8-figure mark. Investors were circling. Awards followed. And with success came something Cora hadn't prepared for. The return of those who once left. Her family. She hadn't heard from her mother in over 12 years. Not since the day she'd married William in a tiny chapel in Atlanta, wearing borrowed heels and hope like armor. They'd wanted her to marry a wealthy lawyer from Savannah, someone with the right pedigree. When she chose love instead of legacy, they'd slammed the door and bolted it shut. But now, here they were, her mother, 2 of her sisters, and even Uncle Harold, calling, texting, writing. The same people who hadn't shown up for William's funeral, who hadn't sent a card when she lost her job, who never once asked if her sons had food on their table. Family means everything. One letter read in thick, careful cursive. We should never have let pride get in the way. Cora stared at the letter for a long time before folding it neatly and sliding it into the junk drawer. Next came the other side of the divide. William's relatives, the Finleys. His cousin Denise sent a video message, voice syrupy sweet. Cora, honey, we're so proud of the boys. I always said they had greatness in them. Must be those Finley genes. Cora almost laughed at the gall of it. The Finleys had never accepted her. Not when she married William, and certainly not after his diagnosis. When the bills stacked higher than their fridge, when Cora begged for help paying the hospital, when she sat in sterile waiting rooms clutching empty pockets, they were nowhere. And now they wanted dinner. Nick was furious. They want a piece, don't they? He spat, pacing in the living room. They abandoned us, Mom. Now they see cameras and money, and suddenly they're family. Jordan had already drafted a blog post. The title read, "Where were you when we had nothing?" "I'll post it tonight," he said, his jaw tight. They don't get to rewrite history. Paul was quiet, but the tension in his shoulders spoke volumes. Even Charlie, usually the most composed, muttered darkly under his breath as he organized a box of company receipts. Cora listened to them all, her tea growing cold in her hand. "Enough," she said softly, for heads turned toward her. "I will meet with them," she said. Nick blinked. "Why? Why give them anything?" "I'm not giving them anything. I'm giving myself peace." She met their eyes, steady as ever. Sometimes you don't confront the past to win, you confront it to put it to rest. They met on neutral ground, a quiet cafe in the old district. Cora arrived early, sitting with her back straight and hands folded. She wore a dark green blouse and simple earrings. Nothing flashy, just grounded. First came her mother, elegant as ever, dressed like she'd stepped out of a country club brunch. Then Aunt Lillian. Then Uncle Harold, looking older but no less smug. They smiled like the years hadn't happened, like pain was a myth people made up. "Cora," her mother began, reaching for her hand. Cora didn't take it. "We just wanted to say how proud we are," Lillian said quickly. "The boys have grown into such fine young men. And you, well, you're practically a hero in the papers." Cora sipped her coffee. "You left when it mattered." There was a silence, thin and sharp. Uncle Harold tried to chuckle. "You were always headstrong. But let's not dwell on ancient history. What matters is we're here now." "Is that what matters?" Cora's voice was still gentle, but it carried weight. "Or is it that the world's watching now?" Her mother bristled. "That's not fair." "No," Cora said. "What wasn't fair was sitting in a hospital hallway wondering how I'd pay for chemo while you ignored every call. What wasn't fair was watching your grandsons eat dry toast and wear the same shoes for 2 winters." Her voice never rose, but the temperature in the room dropped. "You cut me off because I chose love over status. Because William didn't come from old money. But he gave me 4 boys who would walk through fire for each other. That's worth more than any inheritance you ever offered." Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Cora stood. "I didn't come here for apologies. I didn't come for closure. I came to tell you, we're whole. We're happy. And we did it without you." She paused. "So no, you won't be coming to dinners. You won't be posing in photos. And you won't be taking credit for something you had no hand in." She nodded politely, then turned and left. The next meeting was shorter. William's family had gathered at a steakhouse, expecting charm and nostalgia. They got truth. Cora listened as Denise praised the boys and hinted that maybe the Finley name should be more visible in the business. Cora smiled. Funny, when William was dying, none of you returned my calls. Denise looked wounded. We didn't know how bad it was. You knew enough. You chose distance. That's fine, but you don't get to claim them now. She slid the check toward the center of the table and stood. Good luck with everything, she said. Back at home, the boys were quiet, waiting. Well? Nick asked. Cora took off her earrings, set them on the counter. They're not coming back, she said simply. Not into our lives. Not into our story. Paul looked relieved. Jordan deleted the blog post draft. Charlie exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. You didn't have to face them alone, Mom, Nick said, crossing the room. Cora shook her head. This was mine to face, and I needed to do it. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You always say we made it because we stuck together, he murmured. She smiled up at him. Yes, baby. We made it because we never stopped believing that our love, our truth, was enough. And it was. It always had been. The sun poured gently through the curtains that morning, brushing Cora's face with golden fingers. She stirred awake, not quite ready to let go of the quiet. 60. The number didn't sting the way she thought it might. It was soft, earned. A badge, not a burden. There were no decorations in the kitchen. No breakfast smells drifting through the air. Just a note on the fridge in Charlie's handwriting. Mom, meeting will be running late. We'll be home by 6. Dress nice, but not too nice. Love you. She chuckled softly, folded the note, and tucked it into her pocket. The house was silent, a rare thing in the Finley home, where for decades the air had been filled with footsteps, voices, bickering over cereal, and the occasional crash from one of Paul's early robotics experiments. Now it was just her and the hum of memory. Cora spent the day doing ordinary things. A walk around the block, a stop by the florist to pick out fresh lilies for the living room, and a long bath with her favorite lavender salts. She didn't ask questions, even when her neighbor dropped off a dress bag with a wink and said, I was told you'd need this by 5. Why? She asked but got no response. Well, the dress will sit there. At exactly 6:30, a black town car pulled up in front of her home. The driver smiled at her like he knew a secret. Miss Finley? I'm here to escort you. Cora looked at the dress bag on the couch. Deep navy, floor length, elegant without being flashy. She hadn't worn anything like it since William's funeral. What were the boys up to? She wondered. She stepped into it slowly, carefully, as if slipping into a new skin. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Older, yes, but regal. Not in the way her mother used to define it. Silk gloves and Sunday pearls. But in the way a woman becomes when she's walked through fire and come out glowing. The ride took her across town to the Bellevue Grand, a restored ballroom that hadn't hosted anything less than luxury in over 50 years. It must have been both the longest and the shortest rides of her life, and she kept wondering what surprise her boys had planned. The car door opened, and as she stepped out, applause erupted. Cora blinked dazed. Lining the front entrance were people, familiar and unfamiliar faces, community leaders, journalists, neighbors, former colleagues. Some she hadn't seen since she left the agency. Others she'd met briefly over the years, usually in passing or behind the scenes of the boys' growing empire. Then she saw them, Nick, George, Paul, and Charlie, standing tall at the ballroom entrance, each dressed in formal suits, smiles stretched wide. Charlie stepped forward and offered his arm. Happy birthday, Mom. She swallowed hard. What is this? You'll see, he said, leading her inside. The ballroom glowed with soft golden lights and crystal chandeliers. Tables wrapped in white linens surrounded a stage. At the center of it all was a massive photo wall, pictures of her and the boys across the years. Her holding newborn Nick, the boys with scraped knees, Halloween costumes, graduation gowns, late-night study sessions lit only by candlelight during one of their blackouts. Her sons had turned every scar, every memory, into a mural of survival. The room erupted in cheers again as she entered, guests rising to their feet. Cora blinked rapidly, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from awe. Nick stepped up to the stage and took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Tonight we celebrate 60 years of a life lived with grit, love, and faith. Our mother didn't just raise us, she rescued us. Over and over again. The crowd quieted, reverent. She gave up her career, her comfort, and the little stability she had to make sure we didn't fall through the cracks. And when the world turned away from her, when family disappeared, when doors slammed, she built a new world for us with her own 2 hands. George took the stage next. We promised her once, during a blackout when we had no power, no money, and barely enough bread, that we'd give it all back one day. Tonight we try. He stepped aside and gestured toward a screen. A short video began to play. Interviews with Cora's former co-workers, friends from her old church, social workers she'd crossed paths with, even some of the boys' old teachers. Each one told a small piece of her story. The woman who never gave up, never gave in, and never let her children believe they were less. Then came the reveal. "We're proud to announce the Cora Finley Foundation," Paul said as the lights came up. A non-profit dedicated to supporting single mothers starting over after loss, illness, or abandonment. Housing grants, childcare support, microloans, career training. It's all part of the mission. The crowd clapped, but Cora couldn't move. "And there's more," Charlie added with a grin. "We're officially appointing our mother as chairwoman emeritus of Finley Brothers. She's always been the soul of the company. Now it's on paper." The room stood again, thunderous applause echoing like a wave crashing against years of silence, struggle, and survival. Nick extended his hand. "Come say a few words, Mom." Cora stood slowly, every muscle humming with disbelief and emotion. She made her way to the stage, took the mic, and for a moment, just one, the room blurred behind her tears. She looked at her sons first, then the crowd. "I don't have a speech," she began, her voice steady, "because I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect cameras, foundations, or titles. Truth be told, there were many years I didn't expect to make it to 60. A soft, knowing laugh from the audience. I was told once that choosing love over comfort was foolish. That marrying William, a man with a gentle heart and empty wallet, was a mistake. But he gave me something money never could. He gave me these boys. He gave me faith. And he gave me years of a kind of joy no spreadsheet could ever measure." She paused, then continued. "I have known hunger. I have known fear. I have known the silence of phones that never rang when I needed help. But I have also known the warmth of 4 sons sleeping on the same mattress, just to stay close. I've known the power of whispered promises made by candlelight. And I've known what it is to be carried, not by wealth or status, but by love." The room was utterly still now, some dabbing at their eyes. "So if you see my crown tonight, if you see my smile, this dress, this stage, just know, I didn't ask for any of it. I earned it. Through tears. Through grit. Through grace." She stepped back, nodded once, and the applause rose like a wave crashing through the walls. Later that night, after the guests had left and the ballroom had emptied, Cora rode home with Charlie beside her, her hand resting lightly on his. "You okay?" he asked softly. She smiled. "I'm perfect." Back home, she changed into her nightgown and robe, brewed a cup of chamomile, and stepped out onto the porch. The house was still again, but it was no longer quiet in a hollow way. It was full, with memory, with meaning, with the echo of promises kept. She sat on her old rocking chair, sipping her tea, watching the moon cast silver light over the yard. Beside her, on the little table, was a framed photo of William. Young and smiling, one arm around her waist, the other cradling baby Nick. Cora picked it up gently, tracing his face with her thumb. "We made it, baby," she whispered. "We really did." And in that moment, beneath the stars and silence, Cora Finley, mother, widow, warrior, queen, finally let herself rest. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever been underestimated or abandoned, only to rise stronger later? What helped you keep going? Do you believe family is defined by blood, or by love and loyalty? Why? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories coming up just for you.